studio in Nitro, West Virginia. This is Unreasonable Doubt. It's a podcast about West Virginia University basketball. I'm Josh Witt, and Ross Hodge is closer to ending his head coach at two different jobs phase of his career. Mean Green lost to the UC Irvine Anteaters, 69-67 in the NIT semifinals. North Texas started out strong. I think UC Irvine's first field goal came in with like almost 8 minutes into the game. And somehow UC Irvine had it tied at the half and then won a close one late. So Ross Hodge can, of course, that job is multitasking, even if you're the head coach at one job. Now you can really kind of narrow the focus and say goodbye, get your stuff, come to Morgantown, one step closer to him showing up in Morgantown later this week. So that's happened. Excited to see the Ross Hodge introductory press conference. Chester Frazier will not be there. He announced today that he will return to Virginia Tech under Mike Young as an associate head coach. He's worked with Mike Young before. Yes, I wanted him in Morgantown, but good he found a spot with a guy he's worked with in the past, so I wish Chester Frazier the best in his future endeavors. Jonathan Powell this evening found his new school, inspired by the path of James Okonkwo. JP leaves Morgantown for Chapel Hill. He'll join the fine folks at the University of North Carolina Tar Heels for next season. Will he continue the path of Okonkwo and end up at Akron for the 2026-2027 season? Too early to tell, but good luck with that, JP. And you know the beats of this as far as what's going to be happening in the next few weeks and possibly months. Start with the introductory press conference. Then you get into coaching staff announcements. You get player commitments. You know, you remember last year, a version of that. This year, will it be different? Will there just be like Offrey and Aiden as the only, like there were two holdouts, neither of which, Aiden played like 1 minute this season. Can Ross Hodge, or is he interested in having anybody back from the current roster? Sincere's in the portal, Amani's in the portal. Does the Chester Frazier news affect one or both of them? We're going to find out. KJ Tenner has said that he has not closed the door on coming back to Morgantown. We'll see if that's ultimately up to Ross Hodge and the coaching staff first. And then the guys will decide what they want to do. Don't fault them for whatever decision they make. Selfishly for WVU, it'd be great if obviously you want Offrey to be the ultimate Mountaineer. But it'd be great to have somebody who played minutes this season and scored some points to return for a second year. Is that likely? It feels unlikely, but who knows? You don't know until you know. But there's a lot of this happened in the last couple of weeks. And so let's try to wrap our heads around it with a guest. You've heard my takes on the season. Let's get a take from somebody who was in the press conferences, in the Coliseum, covering the team. This is his second appearance on the podcast. Here's my interview with WB Sports Now's Cody Nespor. All right, Cody Nespor, welcome back to Unreasonable Doubt, a podcast about West Virginia University basketball.
Thanks, Josh. I don't think I need to tell you, but I am a big fan of Unreasonable Doubt.
That's insane to hear, but thank you very much. So 2024-2025 Mountaineers, they beat Central Florida on Senior Day on March 8th. 19 wins, 10-10 in the Big 12. Talk about covering the team from DeVries getting the job through the preseason and the first 31 games of the season. What was it like covering this team?
it was fun. It was frustrating to watch at times. Um, just, I mean, you watch the season, you know. Um, but no, I mean, it was fun. It was, you could feel the excitement, especially when they got back from the Bahamas. You could feel it really materialize around town and in the Coliseum. And obviously that hadn't been there for the last few years, especially coming off last year. So it was really fun. And then to start conference play with that win over Kansas, when they got in the Big 12 play, the crowds were just unbelievable, and it um it was awesome. It was like, I don't want to say the good old days because I'm not that old, but it was like when I was in college, and it was Deuce McBride, Derek Culver, and Oscar, and it was that kind of atmosphere again, and that was really really fun to be back in.
It was a great season until then, and then we get, as a fan base, we get three gut punches in 1 week.
Yeah.
So West Virginia loses to Colorado and Kansas City. Then their name isn't called in the NCAA tournament selection Sunday. And then DeVries leaves for the head coaching job at Indiana. So same question, but for that week, what was it
Mhm.
like covering the basketball team from that loss to the 16 seed Colorado to DeVries heading out of town?
Yeah. It was really just like one hit after the other.
It was.
And it just got it was like, it was like nightmare stuff, like the worst possible thing the fan base could imagine, right? You lose to the worst team in the conference, and then we don't need to rehash it. Everybody in the country thought they were making the tournament, and they don't make it. And then the nightmare scenario for most fans is DeVries leaves after 1 year, and what do you know that? So it really was it was bizarre. I know the fan base thought it was bizarre as well, but it was bizarre to cover because it was like, if we had a break glass in case of emergency, like breaking news kind of stuff, we would have broken the glass at least twice that week, if not three.
Right? Yeah. I mean, West Virginia fans know heartache, and it usually comes in one swift blow, and then, the 2007 in football, it's like
Yeah.
a
Yep.
1-2 punch, but like 1, 2, 3 in a week, it just was a lot for any sport and a lot for even for West Virginia standards.
Yeah.
It's a tough one situation for sure. Three things over a week, crazy. But DeVries is not the first head basketball coach in this century to leave
Mm.
Morgantown for a Big Ten job. I have my guesses on why I'm not taking the move well and why the fan base isn't. Give me your thoughts. The fan base reaction. It can't be surprising, but what are your thoughts on that with DeVries moving on and how the fan base is reacting?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think that was the nightmare scenario, right? And I think, I don't know what started the Iowa stuff, like halfway through the year. But I always thought that was bogus, and obviously it ended up being bogus. But I think that planted the seed, and a lot of people said, that pessimism that exists in the fan base, not for no reason, right? And that planted the seed, and like I said, I think that was the thing in the back of everybody's mind, that they were so worried about, and it was, I don't know, and there was so much that staved that off throughout the year, especially when they got into conference play and all that, and then they lose that Big 12 game, they lose, miss the tournament, and then that happened. So I think it was the progression of that stuff where everybody was already upset, and it was just the worst thing that could happen. Um, and I think another reason people take it so hard is because DeVries worked out so well, right? I mean, exceeded all expectations. I mean, and it felt so good. It felt real. It felt very tangible about what this foundation that was built this year. And it was very very easy to project, to say, oh, Sincere's back, Amani's back. This awesome recruiting class is coming in. They hit the portal, get a couple guys, and we're talking about having a real team here. It was very 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 easy to project that out, and now it's gone. I mean, it's all gone. And so I think that in the swiftness of it too, it was he's gone. Next day, he's in Indiana doing the press conference. The next day, Ren Baker's doing his press conference. It's like, you're right, missed the tournament. I don't know, 4 or 5 days later, the athletic director has to have a press conference about what the heck's going to happen next year. So I think, it was just, it was a terrible succession of events to be a to be a fan for. Um, and like I just keep saying, I mean, it was the worst possible scenario for most people.
Yeah. And looking back, do I think it's still the same reaction if West Virginia does get in the tournament like everybody
Hmm.
predicts? Probably so, but like you said, that the first two things get you in a mood to when the third
Yeah.
thing happens and just like blank slates everything. It was the 1, 2, 3 that really put us in a spot. And then, like you said, Baker's lit in a head coaching search. Lot happened in a week. A lot of guys named. Give me Cody Nespor's top
Hmm.
three candidates. Once Baker does his press conference, I'm sure you were there, he goes into the darkness and does whatever he does. At the jump, who are your top three guys as far as the next candidate? Who did you have in mind?
Yeah. I liked Jared Calhoun even in last year's search. Because I grew up about 20, 30 minutes from Youngstown State. So I very closely knew what kind of job that is, and for him to have that kind of success, I was always impressed by him. Um, so he was immediately at the top of my mind. And then I like Diko Medved a lot. He's another guy that's name was thrown around last year. And obviously he's gotten a nice job now. I wasn't super Ben McCollum, I think, was the sexy name. I wasn't, and I understand it, but I don't know. I would want to see more than 1 year. Obviously, that when you win 30 games, not a lot of people care that it's just 1 year, right? Yeah, but he was
Right.
very impressive. And then I don't know. There was a lot of my real dark horse one was Kevin Willard after he started bad mouthing his administration.
Right.
I was kind of like, this guy is obviously going to be available. He doesn't have an AD. He doesn't like it there. Um, I mean, Will Wade would have been up there, but he was kind of, he was already connected to NC State so much that I didn't think it was. But yeah, those would have been Medved, Calhoun, and Kevin Willard as my dark horse would have been my three at the very beginning.
It would have been, well, Willard. That's the case of if DeVries goes. Not that DeVries laid the breadcrumbs. It was just reported. But I
Yeah,
think what Willard was getting, DeVries just didn't say anything. So he wouldn't have got that kind of backlash, but it still
yeah.
would have been the same thing post loss in the tournament. Um, but they land on Ross Hodge, and he has 2 years of D1 experience at North Texas.
Hmm.
What knowledge, Cody, did you have of Ross Hodge prior to the Ren Baker press conference? And what are your thoughts on Ross Hodge getting the job?
Yeah. I think the first time I heard about him, I think day 2 or 3 of the search, one of my friends texted me just like, "Hey, this guy's name is out there." And I was kinda like, "Eh." I kinda, whatever. But, it's one of these things. I think the reaction to it is kinda what you expect, right? Like, people are a little bit upset, maybe more than a little bit, but people, the excitement's not there because he wasn't one of these big names that was in this cycle, and, the connection to Ren should be a positive, but I think it is being spun as a negative, which I don't think is super fair. But again, it's like you can kind of see where it's coming from with he's only got the 2 years as a head coach, and that I don't hate it. I don't think it's obviously not a flashy move. I do think it's very, very easy for this to turn into a good hire, right? Like if they win at 17, 18, 19, 20 games next year, I think it's very easily look back and say, "Oh, it was a good hire." Um, but I get everybody's criticisms of him, and I have criticisms of him as well. But the thing I like is and I'm sure his numbers are, especially on defense, are immaculate. I mean,
The spreadsheet looks great for Hodge.
even offensively, like the last two, I don't know how much he did offense as the assistant, but the last 2 years the offense has been good. So the numbers are immaculate, and then when you follow his career, everywhere he's gone, they've won, which is another that was my initial reaction when Mike Ostie and I did our show, I think the day of, is like, it's not like they hired a loser,
Right.
right? This
Right.
is not some guy who floats around 500 or who has been fired from a high major
It's
job
not a
before and
retread
is,
hire. That's
yeah.
right.
So, my initial take was I think this was a year or two too early for this guy, right? Because I think another year at North Texas, another 2 years at North Texas, he ends up being one of the big names in a hiring cycle. And so my take is like, I think it's 1 or 2 years too early. But if Ren fully believes in this guy, it that doesn't matter, right? Because you're just getting a jump. So I do get where some of the negativity comes from. But as my motto for every coaching search is don't be afraid to learn new names. And so that's what I always try to get across. Like, just because you didn't know who this guy is doesn't mean he's some bum, right? And like I said, I think it's very easy for this to turn into a good hire, and I think it's very easy for Ren to come out on the other side of this looking like a genius, right? Like he found the next guy. Um, the other side of that coin is it's very easy for this to go south and end up poorly. But
Yeah.
that's life.
That's life, and that's a risk with anything, right? I really do think it was a Calhoun versus Hodge from a fan base perspective.
Yeah,
And nobody was, if it was an election, nobody was winning like 80% of the vote for
yeah,
either one
yep,
of those guys.
yeah,
So you roll the dice, pick one, and go from there. And so Hodge is going to recycle the whole roster
yep.
again. And we're jumping into this revenue sharing era, and we haven't started yet, but I know it's approaching quickly. How do you think the revenue sharing is going to affect the basketball side at WVU? I know Rodriguez is talking about
Mhm.
just kind of breadcrumbs of what it's going to look like on the football side. What's going to be the effect on basketball? Because the things you're reading about, the Big East might have a leg up here early because of
Yeah.
what they can devote to basketball with smaller football programs. Give me your thoughts on how revenue sharing affects WVU specifically.
Yeah, so I think, I don't think it's the worst thing to be hiring a coach right now, especially when you lose the whole roster, to give a guy a clean slate and to have this new money coming in. I don't think that's the worst scenario in the world. Obviously, I think most people would prefer to have DeVries, um,
Sure.
to have kept him for this. But I think, you bring this guy in, he has a clean slate roster wise. There's a few guys still on the roster, but um, and then you're going to get all this money, and they have they got the 6 million in the buyout too. Um, and Red said a lot of that's going to men's basketball. And we know a lot of it wasn't going to be used for Hodge's buyout. Um, so it's I don't know. I think it all depends, where does that money go? Because they're not a program that the facilities are good. All the side, backdoor stuff is good. So really, you can look at it and say, if they spend this money on assistance or you know, I think that's it, where this money ends up. And I said, again, when Mike and I did our show, I said the worst thing that could happen with all this money is to just put it away for a rainy day, right?
Right.
Especially if you're going to hire a new coach, it's got to go somewhere tangible. It's got to go somewhere, fairly visible to the fan base, to say like, hey, we're all in on this guy who you might not like him today, but we believe he's a winner. And so I don't know, I I don't know the best places it could go. I know the worst places it could go. is,
Right.
which, but I think as long as it's used, whether, like I said, whether it's assistance contracts, whether it's, even if they want to upgrade facilities or the support staff or something like that, it's got to go somewhere, and it's got to be very visible to point where it's like, we got this buyout money, we've got the revenue share. Here's directly how it's improved the basketball program for this guy we believe in. Because I think if you don't do that, it's like, which I don't think they're not going to be behind Hodge. But if you don't do that, if it's not, kind of tangible where this money is, it's, we hired this guy and there's not full support behind him, or there's not, we're not doing the most that we can. Um, right. And you always hear about how much teams spend, and they're in the lower third of the Big 12 or whatever. And it's like, this is the chance, bring this guy in, give him all the resources he could want, um, and, make something happen.
Right. Results plus drawing A to B on what
Yeah.
you've done with that money to get the results that you're looking for. Totally makes sense. And it's early, and it's going to be fascinating to see, not just with WVU, but how Big 12, SEC, Big 10,
Yeah.
what they do with that football money, how it flows to basketball, and and how they'll react to this idea of the Big East having a leg up. I can't imagine that standing, how that gets evened out, or that'll be interesting to see, and it's all going to play out. Thank you for the time, Cody. One last question. How many times
Yeah.
you were in those press conferences all season long. How many times did you hear Darren DeVries say the words West Virginia in your time doing press conferences?
Oh gosh, I don't know. What?
I mean,
This-
I asked the question because
yeah.
I watched, and I just from memory, and I know it could have happened. I don't remember him saying West Virginia once. Our team, our players,
Yeah.
but the actual state of West Virginia and saying the two words back to back West Virginia, I don't remember hearing it. And it's just not a critique, just a
Yeah.
observation. And I
Yeah.
wanted to see if I'm off base on that, or is that something that's in your memory too?
I'm sure he said it. But I don't. Off the top of my head, I don't.
I don't even
My,
know what point I'm trying to make here,
yeah.
other
My.
than just hindsight 2020. He obviously the money's better at Indiana, and you don't fault somebody for an opportunity that he sees as a good opportunity to advance his career. But as
Yeah.
far as then you look back at the lens of what his time was here, I saw him moving in silence and thought that was a good thing at the time. But then when he leaves, it's like, well, was there something he was telling us that like this isn't for me? And
Yeah. So
so I'm just grasping for straws there.
yeah. So that's I talk to him 2-3 times a week for the whole season in these press conferences. I think something that people don't realize is like that's just what he was like, right? Like that was just his.
He didn't
Like
change.
he
Yeah.
did he didn't say a lot. Bob Huggins would sit there and joke around with us for an hour and then call it a day. That's not what Darren did.
Correct.
And so I kind of hate to fault the guy because like I would hate for somebody to look back on me about anything I've done and you know try to find hidden stuff, and it's like that's just who I am,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so I think to a degree that's just kind of who Darren is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the risky run when you don't have a big personality. Is like people don't get to know you, and so they do like project certain things, or especially now how everybody feels, right? Everybody's gonna
Oh
project bad
yeah.
stuff on it.
Yeah.
But no, like I never got the slightest hint that he was unhappy or that he was one foot out the door or that he, some people say he was like gave up on the team in the second, like that. No, that like I never got a hint of that. I think he was just a low key guy, monotone, said what he needed to say to the media and went home. And that's not wrong. That's just
how he was, and he was consistent with that all the way
yes,
through.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll
So
see. Hodge kind of looks like a rootin' tootin' Texan, so
we'll
we'll
get to
see.
know him later this week. Hopefully, at least get a personality check on what he's like. It
Yeah,
should be fascinating. But that'll be later this week. Cody, again, appreciate the time. Thank you for coming back to
yeah,
Unreasonable Doubt, a podcast about West Virginia University basketball. Unreasonable Doubt is under the Smoking Musket umbrella. Go to smokingmusket.com. Read posts about WVU sports, daily throwdown. Check that out. Go to the Discord. We're talking about WVU sports and other stuff on the Smoking Musket Discord. Link for that is in the show notes. Listen to West by Pod, the WVU football podcast under the Smoking Musket umbrella. Do all that stuff. Smoking Musket. Big thanks to Cody for joining the podcast. Read his work on WVSportsNow.com. Follow Cody on X at Cody Nespor, CodyNespor. That's it for this episode of Unreasonable Doubt. Listen on all the platforms or just pick one: Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Overcast Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, YouTube. Until next time, I'm Josh Witt. WVU for the 2025-2026 season They have 0 wins and they have 0 losses.